Okay, what's up, guys? It's Ryan here. And today I'm going to be talking a little bit about self betrayal and what happens when you spend a very long time being somebody that you're not and acting in dissonance from the values and the understanding of the world that you have internally in order to please other people. So I'll tell you a little bit of a story. Growing up, I always was the kid who wanted to fit in, who felt like I didn't really belong. I was an only child. I grew up with a rare skin condition. I had a lot of things that made me feel a lot different from other people. And what this led to in my life was having the experience of really just bouncing between groups of people, kind of being exuberant, over the top, really loud and boisterous to try and garner attention, and making lots of friends, but never really feeling fully accepted or fully belonging. The only times that I did feel accepted, and this is again a little bit of like an ego piece, is that it was only with people who were really big outcasts, which I resonated with, or funny enough, people who I perceive to be of lower intelligence than me. And say what you want about that. That's in hindsight, not in the time. But looking back, I realized that what that did was it reduced the threat of the environment, right? And for me, growing up, when you feel a lack of self worth, when you feel a little bit of uncertainty internally, then you have this experience where maybe I don't fit in, maybe I'm not enough as I am, maybe I need to perform and belong and lie and sort of manipulate my stories to sound cooler than I am. And the only places where I didn't need to do that in my life were around people who were social outcasts to begin with, or for people who I felt like, I'm a fairly naturally intelligent guy. And if someone was, obviously not a naturally intelligent person, then especially at, 10, 12 years old, it was felt like an easy way for me to kind of just take a lead of the situation. I didn't have to worry about whether I was going to be outperformed intellectually. So, this carried on into my high school years. And what happened to me in high school was that I encountered, cannabis, I encountered drugs and alcohol as you do in high school. And this becomes the new vector for fitting in, right? Because now I have a thing. The thing actually removes a lot of the parts of me that feel those negative feelings. It takes down that sort of social barrier in my mind. So it really enables me to feel that connection with other people that otherwise I would have been performing for. And what starts to happen is I start to really lean on those things in social situations. So now I'm excited to go to a party because I know I'm going to be able to drink, and when I drink, I know I'm going to have a good time because I'm going to let go of all the automatic internal negative thinking that I have and all of the insecurities that I have. A lot of those would melt away really easily. And for me, what happened is I discovered cannabis in particular. And cannabis was a really cool social vector tool for me. I felt like it opened up my creativity. It made me giggle. It made me laugh. It made me really let my guard down in social situations. I would hang out with my friends. We'd go into a shed. We'd all sit there, listen to rap music, tell stupid stories, make fun of each other, and just have a grand old time. And what I didn't know at the time is that I had the seeds of addiction inside of me, because what happens is when you feel like your skin doesn't fit, when you feel like things are not exactly right, and especially in social situations, it creates a lot of internal pressure. It creates a lot of internal discomfort. And that discomfort is not something that we're really humanly equipped to deal with, right? And there has to be tools and ways that we learn to manage that. And that's usually through the mentorship process, through parents or through society. We kind of get guided into tools that we use on a day-to-day basis to help to sort of cognitively and emotionally work through these issues that we face when we have feelings of not being a part of, and we have feelings of kind of being less than, which everybody encounters on some level. Now, the issue with somebody who's an addict is usually what happens is those tools haven't actually been given to or haven't taken place. So in my experience, I was never really given the natural tool book, or never really instructed on how to manage these things. And a lot of the times emotions and certain elements of personal needs were neglected in my house. And so that was something that I never learned how to really deal with. And so as I got older, the degree at which that I felt different and uncomfortable with myself began to grow and grow and grow. And at the same time, I was also utilizing drugs and alcohol more and more and more, because now I had a tool, I had some kind of thing that took me out of myself, and it allowed me to manage the feelings, the thoughts, the emotions, the fear, the insecurity that I felt from a very young age. What happened for me then is that with an addict, when you encounter a solution to the problem, and for an addict, that solution is a substance, often it can be food or gambling or sex, and it can be other things as well. For me, it was a lot to do with substances and sometimes food and those kinds of things as well. But what happened for me is that slowly that social connection, that thing that it brings, starts to become secondary to the actual experience itself, which means that I'm no longer needing to go into these social situations to engage with these people, and in order to do that I needed to use drugs and alcohol. Instead, what I would do is I could actually learned that I could simply use the drugs or alcohol in isolation. And now I didn't ever even have to experience the emotions that came with feeling apart from, feeling less than, feeling kind of different and weird. I never had to put myself in those situations anymore, and I still got all the good feelings that I got from the drugs, from the alcohol, from whatever it was that I was using at the time, right? And for me, drug of choice was cannabis for a very long time. So here's what happens from there. Humans are certainty seeking creatures. We like to have a clear picture of the world, right? That's what our ego wants. Our ego wants to have a clear map of the world that we use to operate. It's our default mode network. It's the way that we show up in the world every day. We have a clear concept of what's true and what's not. And that allows us to navigate the world in a very well structured way, right? It helps our executive functioning to structure problems, to navigate solutions, and to ultimately prioritize our lives, because we see a very clear map of how we view the world. And that is a certainty that all humans grasp for. Obviously, we don't love uncertainty. We don't love, contemplating death and all these things that are going to happen. That is a certainty, but there are such uncertainties around it that we tend to avoid those things and try to gain some clarity, some presence, some certainty as much as we can. So in my experience, what ended up happening for me was I started looking for certainty in all kinds of different areas in my life. And for me, it was spiritual seeking at first, because I felt that there was something grander to life, especially with cannabis. It's a psychotropic drug. It starts to really open your mind and it creates a lot of openness in the experience. And so as a young, closed minded individual who felt very rigid in his beliefs, a strong atheist, encountering cannabis over and over again, the feelings, the emotions, the experiences that it produced started to open me to these more spiritual ways, these more alternative ways of thinking. And when I discovered that, when I discovered things like Hinduism, Buddhism, started discovering, meditation and different kinds of mystical practices and occult schools and mystery schools and all these things that I had never been exposed to, my mind really loved that and grabbed onto it. And there was kind of a twofold thing. One is a genuine interest there. I was really curious to understand what it is behind all of this stuff. Why are these people mystics across the world all talking about these very complex kind of cerebral, issues that I don't really understand, and I wanted to know more. And then secondly, what happened was that it was starting to give me a sense of identity, right? I started to attach my identity to knowing these things that, frankly, most people in a high school setting are not contemplating, the systems of the chakras in the body, or chi energy, or looking at, temples and looking at ashrams and gurus and learning about their different practices and looking at Vipassana and all these different things. So I started to build an identity around being that guy, because being that guy made me feel special. It made me feel different. And as that progressed, what that actually led me down was a very deep rabbit hole of deep, deep, deep conspiracy theory, deep, deep, deep rejection of the social norm. Very, very much an alternative thinker. I started to reject the school system, reject the government, reject everything that I saw, because I was my entire world became flipped on its head. Basically, I became exposed to all of these ideas about conspiracies, about one world governments, Illuminati, all these different Freemasonry, Egyptian pyramids, the interconnection of these different cultures around the world, alternative history timelines, things that really, as a 16-year-old who's utilizing cannabis, is a budding addict, is beginning to socially isolate, is not a great place to go. Because what happens is now there's a greater degree of isolation. I've already isolated in some way in my using. I've isolated from people because it feels safer to be alone. And now I've gone and done another deep isolation process, where now I've built a map of the world that is different than probably 98% of the population, 99% of the population. I see things 100% differently. The degree of openness in my mind, the degree of naivety in my mind allows me to accept these ideas without too much critical thinking. So I'm not critically analyzing these ideas. I'm taking a lot of things at face value. I'm starting to really absorb a lot of fringe thinking, and some of that thinking is very interesting, and some of that thinking is just absolutely ludicrous. And looking back, I now understand that, but at the time, I didn't have the critical thinking skills to analyze that. So here's what happened. In time, what happened was that I began to feel like I had secret knowledge that nobody else had. And I began to feel special and feel different and feel like I knew things. And so now what happened is there was a degree of inflation and arrogance that came with that. I actually gained a lot of interesting, mystical knowledge about the world that was very good. I think that that was very valuable to have. It was unfortunately enmeshed with a lot of personal issues that I wasn't working through at the time, and that created a lot of arrogance and it created a lot of separation from my peers. And so there's a couple things that happened. One is that it did allow me to become a very confident in some way individual. I was still very fragile inside, but I put on an air of confidence. I had a lot of certainty in my belief system. And a lot of people actually looked to me for guidance. A lot of people actually looked to me for certainty because they saw that I had some certainty about things that they didn't, right? And I had a lot of certainty at that time about how I saw the world. And so it was actually a very beautiful thing because a lot of people saw me as somebody who knew something. And given the ego that I had at the time, that blew me up and inflated me because I never felt like I had anything to offer in the world before that, right? I really felt diminished and small before then in a lot of ways. Now, going forward, that was a really interesting chapter where I actually had a lot of certainty. I was still terrified. I couldn't talk to a girl person. I couldn't talk one on one with a girl. I felt uncomfortable in social situations. I felt different from everybody else. My isolation grew, but I also still felt special. I still felt like I was this unique guy who had these things who no one could really understand. You don't understand me. I'm just this different guy. And as that progressed, I made a lot of great friends and had a lot of cool conversations and did a lot of thinking in that span of time. Well, unfortunately, what happened to me was as an addict, things, as they say in recovery, always better, always worse, never better. Not always better, always worse, never better. And so over time, what happened is I started to develop a lot of neuroses in my mind. I started to develop a lot of anxiety, a lot of really grandiose, almost like estranged thinking. I started to really feel a lot of resentment and anger to my peers, people that thought, in a more strategic way or thought in a more, conventional way, who I saw were getting outcomes in life that I actually wanted, but I had rejected due to my own sort of calibration in the world because I had started to reject money, I started to reject conventional paths. And so even though I saw these people getting things that I wanted, whether that was money, success in school, women, whatever it was, I wanted it, but I also rejected it, and it created this divide inside of me because there's a core system of belief that gets formed much earlier in life, and that value system is strong, and I flipped that value system on its head in my teens, and now these two worlds are colliding with one another, and it the only way to manage that collision, there really would only be two ways, right? One way would be to realize that the way I was thinking was not optimal and to take steps in the other direction. Start trying harder at school, start getting jobs, start saving money, start trying to get uncomfortable outside of my own sort of bubble, getting rid of the drugs and alcohol. And I tried that for periods of time. I tried to put cannabis down, I tried to stop drinking. Never ever worked. I could get maybe 3, 4, 5 months, but there was a deep seated belief that those things were inherently good and not bad. So I never felt that I needed to stop, even though the part of me knew that something was wrong, I didn't want to stop. So what happened? Over the next 4 years, my life took a fall off a cliff. My relationship started to massively degrade. I was not answering the phone. I wasn't texting my friends. I was no longer social. I was completely isolated. Some of my closest long term friends couldn't get a hold of me. I wouldn't pick up the phone. I would spend days and days in my room alone. I was failing out of school. I couldn't hold down a job. And I had all these dreams. I wanted to travel. I wanted to see ashrams. I wanted to see the world. I wanted to open up a school. I wanted to open up a place where people could go to a retreat center and heal themselves. All these ideas, right? All these beautiful things. But as they say, in people who smoke a lot of cannabis, it's a pipe dream. It's a pipe dream because there's no tangible action attached to it, right? It's all thinking, it's all cerebral. And so soon the dissonance between what I think I am and what I feel I am, and this grandiose sense of identity that I have, becomes so far dissonant from the actual outcomes in my life: failing, broke, single, lonely, no friends, just so far away that to me it ends up creating a mental break, because as the pressure increases, what do I do as an addict? I use more and more and more and more, because the only solution I have in my mind is to use more. And actually what I'm doing is destroying my life, but it feels to me that it's the only solution. So I continue to destroy my life until I completely crumble, right? And when I crumble is when reality is once again shattered for me, because this whole time that I spent with a very strong sense of reality in my mind, a very strong sense of what I felt was true, all of a sudden that was proven to be incorrect, right? Because all of the outcomes I had showed me that my way of thinking was no longer correct. And so I have a whiplash effect. And I look back and I see how I've done so many things incorrectly. Look at what a bad person I was. Look at how poorly I treated people. Look at how bad I did in school. Look at how much I've let my family and my friends down. I can't believe I bought into all this nonsense, and really then was left in an open space of nothingness, right? I was completely lost, completely lost. And this was like really the darkest years of my life. Darkest years of my life, somewhere between 23 and 25, 26. Really some dark years. And, you know, it's funny because that, all of that, what was going on at some level was me attempting to find a way through the world that was my own, which is a natural inclination, and also to belong. I really did want to belong. I really did want to fit in, right? But at the same time, I was so preoccupied with what other people thought of me that I felt I had to really carry a certain persona in order to be accepted, in order to belong. And this became unconscious, you know? And so when I stopped trying to belong was not because I didn't want to anymore, but I had completely let go of the idea that it was possible. I felt I was too different. I was too broken. I was gone. And so for 24 to 27, 26 was a complete restructuring of my view of the world. I started to reconsider my ideas. I was completely mentally sick for a long time, tons of panic attack and depression and crying and lostness and not knowing how to integrate these ideas still, right? How do I handle the fact that I failed out of school when I thought I didn't really care about school, and how do I handle being broke when I thought I didn't need a corporate job, and all these things. And so this was the outcome of me being, from a young age, not knowing how to fit in and trying to put on a persona for other people instead of just being true to myself. And the outcome of that, as I've illustrated here in a very maybe roundabout way, in a way that maybe put us down a few rabbit holes, is that when you betray yourself for a long time, and when you go sort of in a different direction of what is actually authentic and true, what ends up happening is your map of the world gets eviscerated, and you no longer have any sense of identity or relationship to the world. In a way, it's like an ego dissolution, right? My ego was completely dissolved in a weird way, where there was no ground to stand on anymore, and I was very confused and lost. And that's a terrifying place to be, because as I mentioned in the beginning of the video, we want certainty as human beings. We want to feel belonging and certainty. We want social connection, and we want to know that we're working towards a life that we want. And I wasn't doing any of those things. And so the consequence now of the years of self-betrayal, the years of trying to fit in, the years of being an arrogant, egotistic, sort of self-absorbed individual, all of that time, what that led me to is a point that I'm at now. I'm turning 29 next week, and you know, what is crazy is that having almost achieved now 1 year of pure sobriety, many years off of cannabis, almost 6 years off of cannabis. If I don't have a day, but it's somewhere in the 6 year mark. But they say that when you get sober as somebody who's an addict, that you basically are now picking up where you left off when you started your using. And I started my using when I was 13 or 14 years old, which means my maturity level in a lot of ways is stagnated there. And the experience, the visceral experience of that now is that there's a lack of a sense of identity. There's a lack of groundedness. There's a lack of understanding of exactly who I am, what I want, what I believe. Because after that collapse, I went the complete opposite direction and decided that I must have been entirely wrong about everything. And so now everybody else must be entirely right about everything. That's the black and white thinking that I encounter. And so now everybody else must be right about everything. So my map of the world now depends on you to tell me what's true or not. And that is an even more treacherous and scary place, I believe, from my experience, than the place that comes when you are so arrogant and so sure about what you see of the world. Because when you're sure, you feel secure. But when you're unsure and you're looking for guidance from everybody else, that's where all of a sudden it becomes very scary because now your happiness, your success, your everything depends on everybody else. So over the last year, what I've been doing is really rebuilding a sense of identity, really rebuilding a sense of who is Ryan. What does Ryan want? What does Ryan believe? And what is Ryan willing to do to get to his goals? What is the impact that Ryan wants to have in the world? And what I've landed on so far, and I've known this from a very long time, and what I've learned and what I've landed on is that my dharma, my calling in this world is to help people who've been through the same situations that I have, right? Who've been through that loss of self, who've been through the people pleasing, who've been through the insecurity, the fear, the obsession, the mental breaks that come with being an addict or with just being a human being. And, coming through all of that, they say that the healer's path, the master healer path is one that is rife with suffering. It's riddled with fear and darkness and pain. And what the healer does is takes that experience and transmutes it like an alchemist into gold. And then is able to take that experience and pass it on to people and help those people to succeed, to live a full life. And that is now what I understand to be my calling in the world. You know, my calling is to help other people get through some of those challenges in their life. And as a healer, we walk first. We walk that path first, right? And so, do I regret all of the suffering? Do I regret the things that I've been through? Do I regret not showing up for my friends and family? And do I regret failing and going broke and losing everything and losing my mind, quite frankly, in the process? On one level, I want to say yes, because there are many parts of that at the time felt incredibly unnecessary. Why would a higher power or God allow me to suffer in this way or want me to suffer in this way? But on the other hand, I've now been able to, through a process of inner alchemy, look back and see how all of that experience is going to serve humanity. It's going to serve people who have been through the same struggles. And coming into, in astrology, they say this is the Saturn's return, where Saturn returns into its place that it was when you were born for the first time. And this is a place of great identification upheaval. Your identity becomes completely restructured through the ages of 28 to 30. Now I'm halfway through that process and I do feel that way internally. I do feel as though my identity is being restructured. And, I have to say that the core principle behind that, there's a couple core principles. One of them is building self trust by taking small actions into what I believe to be true and testing, right? Testing reality to see if what I think is true is true. And the second piece is, you know, starting to really take inventory and see what exactly I did right and wrong, and then doing more of the right things and eliminating the wrong things. Like it is quite literally that simple. And when I start to act on my own beliefs again in a safe and controlled way, I build self trust, right? I build self esteem. I build an understanding that I'm capable of success. I'm capable of connection. I'm capable of all the things that I felt at one time that I was never going to be capable of. I'm capable of doing scary things and I'm capable of putting myself out there. And all of this is through the process of, for one, eliminating the routes of escape. It's like they say the common phrase, the classic phrase is like burn the boats. Burn the boats. The old you is in the past. And if you can look back at the old you, accept the old life that you had, look back and say, It's time to burn these fucking boats and move forward without the attachment to the old you that, may contain tons of shame, tons of guilt, tons of regret. If you can look back and burn those boats, start now. Wake up as a fresh human being in the morning and know that you still have an entire process in front of you. And instead of spending all your time looking in the rearview mirror, you're looking through that big glass in front of you and you're appreciating what's ahead and you're appreciating what you've got right now, which is, excuse me, which is a vehicle for transformation. It's a vehicle that is moving forward, and we are evolving, transforming beings. We are literally like a plant that is seeking sunlight and is seeking growth. And if you are finding yourself stuck inside of a little container that's too tight and your roots are pushing against the sides and you're stretching for the sun, but you can't quite get there, look at what that container is. Look at the thing that is stopping you. For me, it was drugs and alcohol. That was the main thing that was keeping me stuck. Because when I was able to escape from the feelings, I was able to escape from the responsibility, I was able to get away from what would be uncomfortable and necessary for my growth. I remained in that little pot. I remained in that little tiny pot and I never grew. As soon as I was able to break some of those chains off, open myself up, and actually start to face life exactly as it presents itself in front of me, well, now I'm able to actually start to learn how to evolve, learn how to change, learn how to get what I want, learn what I do and don't want, and actually allow my interests, my hobbies, my wisdom to bubble up because I'm no longer looking to escape it. Part of that process is looking back and seeing who have I wronged in this process? Who have I done harm to? Who have I been not the kind of person who I want to be? And if I can look back and mend those relationships and start to heal the past and accept the past, then my forward trajectory becomes very exciting, becomes very full of potential and possibility, and I'm able to do exactly what I need to do one day at a time to get where I'm looking to go. So, as a people pleaser, as a person who had very little sense of identity, very little sense of self-esteem, very little sense of anything to do with being a good human being, a responsible or contributing human being, took me a very long time to learn that I can test a new way of being. And I'm in the metamorphosis. I'm in the process now of testing that. And I have to say that there is a lot of discomfort and challenge that comes with doing that, right? And without any discomfort, without any challenge, there really is no growth. So, embracing that uncomfortability, embracing that uncertainty, embracing the fact that I don't know exactly what I'm going to be able to do, but I know that I'm going to give it my all and I'm going to fucking go. That's a beautiful thing. Anyways, guys, it's never too late to get shit on track. You're already, as Gary Vee says, you're still in the first quarter. If you're under 30, 35 years old, you still got one and a half, two lives ahead of you from where you've lived right now. You got more time than you could ever imagine to do what it is you set out to do when you came here as a little baby spirit. You can do what you need to do. You can do what you want to do. You can accomplish everything you set your mind to. We have to just unshackle and remove the burdens of the past, open the heart, release the trauma, release the self attack, and together we'll walk each other home. So, thanks for watching, guys. It was really nice yapping with you today, and we'll talk to you soon.